Let's get philosophical. Critical Reflections on Conspiracy Theory. Authored by Kurtis Hagen. The following is a modified portion of an article entitled Conspiracy Theorists and Monological Belief Systems, published in the open-access academic philosophy journal called Argumenta in 2018 by Kurtis Hagen.
Conspiracy Theorists and Monological Belief Systems, Part 2, Social Scientists and Double Standards. In Part 1 of this two-part podcast series, I argued that the often-cited claim that conspiracy theorists tend to simultaneously believe contradictory conspiracy theories is unfounded. This claim stems from a paper called Dead and Alive, by Michael Wood, Karen Douglas, and Robbie Sutton. I also discussed a study led by Viren Swamy that purports to show that conspiracy theorists are more prone than others to believe entirely fictitious conspiracy theories, which I argued is one-sided and misleading. Both of these studies claim to provide evidence that conspiracy theorists tend to operate within a monological belief system, an idea first put forward by Ted Goertzel in 1994. This label, as described by Goertzel, seems to imply that there is something epistemically problematic about the reasoning of conspiracy theorists. However, the evidence produced in these studies supports only a connection with unproblematic aspects of monological belief systems. There is no documented evidence that problematic aspects of it actually apply to conspiracy theorists. And yet these articles, along with similar others, have been used to imply that something epistemically problematic has been discovered about the reasoning of conspiracy theorists in particular. Swamy regards Goertzel's claim that conspiracy beliefs form part of a monological belief system as, quote, perhaps one of the most important conclusions, unquote, of studies addressing influences on belief in conspiracy theories. Elsewhere, Swamy and colleagues elaborate.
In a seminal study, Goertzel, 1994, argued that conspiracy beliefs form part of a monological belief system in which a conspiratorial idea serves as evidence for other conspiracist ideation. Thus, for example, recent work has shown that respondents who more strongly endorsed conspiracy theories about the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks were more likely to believe in other, unrelated conspiracy theories.
They also tie in the results of their 2011 study.
We showed that the strongest predictor of belief in 7/7 conspiracy theories was belief in other, general conspiracy theories. This is consistent with the suggestion that conspiracist ideation forms part of a monological belief system, where one conspiratorial idea serves as evidence for other conspiracist ideation. In the case of the present study, it might be suggested that belief in a range of conspiracy theories provides a basis for comprehending and accepting 7/7 conspiracy theories.
There is something strangely asymmetrical about this study. It purports to tell us something about conspiracist ideation, presumably as opposed to non-conspiracist, or conventional, ideation. Namely, conspiracy beliefs, in particular, form part of a monological belief system in which a conspiratorial idea serves as evidence for other conspiracist ideation. But is there really anything here that applies uniquely to conspiracy ideation, or that, in any case, is epistemically problematic or noteworthy? I do not think so. What Swamy and colleagues describe is a characteristic of all sensible people, including believers in conventional interpretations of events. What follows is Swamy's summary of his results modified by simply replacing individual words so that it applies to the tendency to believe conventional accounts, that is, conventionalist ideation, instead of conspiracist ideation.
Conventionalist ideation may initially begin as an individual process, in which a person tries to make sense of some event perceived as threatening or calamitous. In such a scenario, a tendency towards conventionalist ideation may tend to be more prevalent among individuals who are politically trustful/naive, show weaker support for democratic principles, have higher self-admiration, are more agreeable/acquiescent. Once this process has been initiated, a confirmation bias and avoidance of cognitive dissonance may further the drive towards conventionalist ideation. However, our results also suggest that the strongest predictor of whether or not an individual will ultimately accept a conventionalist theory is the presence of earlier conventionalist ideation. This is entirely consistent with the suggestion that conventionalist theories form part of a monological belief system, where conventionalist ideation increases the chances that an individual will accept evidence of conventional explanations. Such a system may allow individuals to easily comprehend new phenomena within existing belief systems, but communal reinforcement may also play a role in embedding conventional accounts within particular social groups.
Now, what exactly is a monological belief system? So far I have only mentioned, quoting Swami, that it involves, quote, a conspiratorial idea serving as evidence for other conspiracist ideation, unquote. Let us look more closely. Ted Goertzel, the originator of the idea that conspiracy theorists are monological thinkers, puts this in more general terms.
In a monological belief system, each of the beliefs serves as evidence for each of the other beliefs.
Goertzel's study provides evidence that this manner of reasoning applies to conspiracy theorists, a finding that is later supported by other studies. However, there is something strange about pointing out this fact. For the reasoning it describes is both ubiquitous and epistemically unproblematic. Of course, one belief serves as evidence for another, and so it should. There is hardly an alternative. If one is convinced that Al-Qaeda was behind the embassy bombings in Africa, as well as the attack on the USS Cole, should that be taken as evidence, as is often suggested, that Al-Qaeda was behind the September 11th attacks? The answer, clearly, is yes. It is evidence, though, of course, not proof. And because it is evidence, a rational person should, based on this consideration, increase his or her assessment of likelihood that that event was carried out by Al-Qaeda. In general, the degree of credence one gives to one event is, and should be, influenced by one's beliefs about other events. In this case, of course, the September 11th attacks and the embassy bombings are thought to be related, both perpetrated by Al-Qaeda. What is supposed to be interesting about the reasoning of conspiracy theorists is that they make inferences about particular conspiracy theories from other unrelated conspiracy theories. As Sutton and Douglas explain,
the most consistent finding on the psychology of conspiracy theories, often used as an explanation for their popularity and persistence, is that belief in one particular conspiracy theory is predicted by belief in other theories even when they refer to completely unrelated events and protagonists.
For example, Swami and colleagues cite evidence that people who
more strongly endorsed conspiracy theories about the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks were more likely to believe in other, unrelated conspiracy theories.
But are the conspiracy theories in question really unrelated in the relevant sense? That is, are they epistemically unrelated? That is what matters. After all, of what significance is being unrelated in some other sense? So long as belief in one theory gives one a good reason to give increased credence to another, there is nothing distinctive or problematic about doing so. Wood, Douglas, and Sutton themselves provide reasonable considerations. In Dead and Alive, they mention several plausible mediating beliefs, including belief in deception by authority and belief in the effectiveness of intimidation and bribery. A person who believes that authorities are more deceptive than does someone else, perhaps based on their knowledge of a particular case, has reason to regard conspiracy theories as more plausible than does the other person. Which person has more accurately assessed the degrees in question is another matter entirely. This need not be a complete explanation, but it is enough to conclude that there is no mystery here. To be clear, I do not have a strong objection to social scientists proving the obvious. What I do find objectionable is framing it in a way that suggests that there is something distinctive going on that reflects poorly on conspiracy theorists when, in fact, there is not. A related notion, also supported by empirical studies, is the following. Kurtis puts it this way.
The more conspiracies a monological thinker believes in, the more likely he or she is to believe in any new conspiracy theory that is proposed.
As Sutton and Douglas put it,
People who already believe in existing conspiracy theories will tend to be receptive to new conspiracy theories, exactly as Kurtis, 1994, suggested.
This effect may seem epistemically problematic, as Kurtis' way of putting it seems to imply. But that is a mistake. Nothing has gone wrong here. As an analogy, the more a person believes that scientific discoveries have solved social problems, whether or not they have good reasons for believing this, the more likely he or she is to believe that a scientific discovery will solve other problems. It is not just monological thinkers who think this way. Everyone does. And everyone should. There is nothing wrong with the inference, so long as it is not conceived of as proof, but only a matter of increasing likelihood. If one's reasons for one's more primary beliefs, on which other beliefs are based, are not good ones, then that is a problem. The problem is that they are reasoning based on shaky premises, not that the inference itself is problematic. But the fact that a person is more likely to accept a new conspiracy theory because they already accept other conspiracy theories in no way implies that the more primary beliefs were not well grounded empirically. Kurtis himself provides the following example.
African Americans, who are more likely to be aware of the Tuskegee syphilis conspiracy, are predisposed to believe that AIDS may also be a conspiracy, while this idea may seem absurd to people who are unfamiliar with past medical abuses.
This much is presumably true. People who are aware of the Tuskegee experiment, and are motivated to consider it, would likely be more disposed, in some degree, to have unconventional beliefs about AIDS than those who are unaware of such historical outrages. And so they should be. It is not that they should believe that AIDS is a conspiracy of some sort. But they should be more inclined to think that it might be than they otherwise would have been. Still, there is something about monological belief systems that is epistemically problematic. Kurtis describes it this way.
Belief systems can be characterized as dialogical or monological. Dialogical belief systems engage in a dialogue with their context, while monological systems speak only to themselves, ignoring their context in all but the shallowest respects.
Sutton and Douglas characterizes this as a key feature of monological belief systems, writing.
For Kurtis, 1994, a key feature of monological belief systems is what we might call a closed epistemology. Beliefs are evaluated according to their coherence with other beliefs in the system, rather than external data.
Clearly, this closed epistemology, in which context is ignored, is epistemically problematic. Sutton and Douglas see the problem as involving two features. They explain.
Kurtis, 1994, identifies two key features of the monological conspiracist mindset. 1. A closed epistemology in which adherents are indifferent to evidence, preferring to rely on their previous beliefs, and 2. A nomothetic explanatory style in which each event is explained in terms of general patterns in the world rather than the unique, proximal conditions that might have brought it about.
These two ideas are clearly related. Conspiracy theorists are charged with disregarding evidence, or, in other words, disregarding the relevant, unique, proximal conditions, and instead reason primarily by analogy to beliefs they have about other cases, and thus tend to focus on general patterns. However, as Sutton and Douglas recognize, there is no evidence for this. Indeed, it seems to be false. Kurtis has, in effect, equivocated between two ideas. 1. People who believe in one conspiracy theory are more likely to believe, or give more credence to, another, because one belief serves as evidence for another. And 2. Conspiracy theorists ignore empirical evidence, and other people too. They speak only to themselves. They are closed-minded. The first claim is supported by scientific research, but is not epistemically problematic. The second claim is epistemically problematic, but is unsupported. Indeed, there is some evidence that the opposite is true. Conspiracy theorists tend to be more open-minded. Goertzel has tried to pin the problematic aspect of his pejorative-sounding monological belief systems on conspiracy theorists, while only actually providing evidence regarding the unproblematic aspects. The further evidence that later accumulated likewise only supported the unproblematic aspects. In sum, the notion that conspiracy theorists operate within a monological belief system suggests that, 1. They attempt to maintain an internal coherence among their beliefs, such that hypotheses that cohere well with settled beliefs are regarded as relatively more plausible, for which studies like Swamy et al., 2011, provide support, but which is in no way unusual or problematic. It also suggests that, 2. Conspiracy theorists live in a particularly closed-off world. We can divide the latter into two claims: 2a, they do not engage with contrary viewpoints, and 2b, they make little effort to ground their beliefs in empirical evidence. However, the evidence provided by various studies purporting to link conspiracist ideation with monological belief systems actually only support the former aspect of monological belief systems, the normal and unproblematic aspect. That is, conspiracy theorists form beliefs based in part on their other beliefs, as we all inevitably do. However, neither of the latter aspects has been established. Indeed, they are both false, at least as they apply to a large segment of conspiracy theorists, who clearly do engage with conventionalists, and often seek out opportunities for debate. And many conspiracy theorists are, as Sunstein admits, spectacularly well informed about the pertinent empirical details, and they are constantly calling for further empirical studies, and demanding the release of relevant records. In a 2014 article, Sutton and Douglas provide a helpful corrective. Specifically, they make a number of valid points that militate against making any negative inferences about the merit of conspiracy theories based on research linking conspiracy theorists with monological belief systems. They point out that
there is no empirical evidence for key tenets of the monological position.
More specifically, they write:
1. There is no evidence that these people explain events in more abstract, general, less case-specific terms. Indeed, even a cursory examination of websites devoted to conspiracies, such as that of the 9/11 Truth Movement, appears to reveal a deep rhetorical attachment to case-specific facts, true or not, regarding the melting point of steel, the burning temperature of aviation fuel, the way the buildings collapsed, and the collapse of neighboring buildings, inter alia. 2. There is little evidence that conspiracy theorists have a generally closed epistemology. Indeed, some findings suggest that such individuals may tend to be somewhat more open to experience. 3. The correlations among various conspiracy beliefs can be explained in other, simpler ways, without invoking a closed epistemology or a nomothetic explanatory style.
Sutton and Douglas conclude:
In sum, we think it is premature, and unfairly pejorative, to portray conspiracy beliefs as a manifestation of monological thinking. Closed-mindedness and willful ignorance of facts are stigmatized characteristics. It is sobering to reflect that scales measuring agreement with conspiracy theories also, by definition, measure disagreement with them. So we might equally say that correlations between conspiracy items show that rejection of conspiracy theories comprises part of a monological worldview, in which alternatives to official accounts are dismissed in a closed-minded and irrational fashion.
Sutton and Douglas are to be commended for their attempt at even-handedness, and for urging other scientists to be non-judgmental. They write:
We would advocate a dispassionate mode of scientific inquiry which is open to the possibility that these theories have conventionally desirable and undesirable consequences, and which is not unduly influenced by the cultural impulse to label them as simply good or bad.
But their attempt at even-handedness is spotty. In addition to continuing to maintain that conspiracy theorists tend to simultaneously believe contradictory theories, they also seem to accept some baseless stereotypes, such as the view that conspiracy theorists base their ideas on, quote, limited information, unquote. They also state:
the majority of conspiracy theories lack evidential support and are resistant to falsification.
They cite a 2002 article by Steve Clark. Although often cited by psychologists working on conspiracy theories, that paper has serious problems pointed out by David Cody and others. In any case, Clark does not exactly assert, much less prove, that conspiracy theories lack evidential support. In fact, though Clark does seem to take a dim view of conspiracy theories, it is not because they simply lack evidential support. Indeed, Clark writes,
conspiracy theorists are typically quite dedicated in their search for evidence relevant to their favorite conspiracy theory and are usually able to overwhelm you with a deluge of evidence in favor of that theory.
So, as it turns out, not only does the claim that, quote, the majority of conspiracy theories lack evidential support, unquote, itself lack evidential support, its falsity is admitted by critics of conspiracy theories. Of course, those critics do not believe the evidence as a whole best supports conspiracy theories, but making an empirical case against these conspiracy theories would require actually dealing with the deluge of evidence. Sutton and Douglas do attribute some positive aspects to conspiracy theories. They point out that conspiracy theories
can be seen as creative, almost heroic efforts by ordinary people to question and to create alternatives to political orthodoxy.
If that does not strike you as a little patronizing, try this one.
They can be seen as products and affirmations of the democratic right to entertain minority views, no matter how absurd or unsettling they seem to the majority.
More significantly, Sutton and Douglas do admit that conspiracy theories
may allow people to question social hierarchies, causing governments to be more transparent and democratic.
But they cannot seem to quite acknowledge the most significant potential positive value, that controversial conspiracy theories might sometimes be on to something, and thus help reveal important truths, thwart pernicious conspiracies, and serve as a deterrent to other would-be conspiracies. Final remarks. In alliance with other social scientists, it seems that some psychologists have invented a problem so as to posit a psychological explanation for it, and do so in a way that seems to reflect poorly on conspiracy theories. But there is nothing here that needs any kind of special explanation, or that should be understood as problematic. The most straightforward view is that different people come to different conclusions about conspiracy theories for the same kinds of reasons that they come to different conclusions about other matters. They weigh up the evidence they are aware of, factoring in some sense of prior probability. Neither the psychological research by Wood and Swamy, nor the arguments of Goertzel, indicate that the explanation for conspiracy theorizing resides in anything more interesting than that. Rather than focusing on conspiracy theorists, many of these lines of investigation could be turned on people who believe official stories. It would be interesting, and arguably at least as important, and would go some way toward bringing balance to this area of research, if some effort was made to explore why it is that so many people believe false or dubious official stories, or ideas that certain elites clearly try to promote even if they do not explicitly state them. For example, why did so many Americans believe that Saddam Hussein was in cahoots with Al-Qaeda? We know that part of the reason is that officials actively encouraged this belief. The question is, why did people buy it? Relatedly, why did soldiers in Iraq believe they were avenging the victims of 9/11? And why did people believe the baby incubator story that was used to market the first Gulf War? These are but a few of the plausible examples.
You have been listening to a modified portion of an article entitled Conspiracy Theorist and Monological Belief Systems, published in the open access academic philosophy journal called Argumenta, in 2018, by Kurtis Hagen.